Welcome to Books on Air, the podcast that tells the story behind the book. It includes insights from authors about how they compose their work, what inspires them, and what they hope you'll take away from their book. Here's your host for this episode of Books on Air, Suzanne Harris.
Welcome to the Books on Air podcast. I'm Sloan Fremont, filling in for Suzanne Harris. This is the podcast where listeners get the secret story behind every book. Joining me today is Jamie Liquorish, author of the book, The Prophecy. This book tells the story of Warwick, a young man who enjoys a quiet life living with his parents in a small house in Scotland. But when a mysterious key emerges with the appearance of an ancient enemy believed to be a myth, his life is turned upside down. Forced into an arduous quest to find answers traveling across the wildest and most challenging terrains in the whole of Scotland, his only aid is a cloaked mystical man. So Jamie, sounds like such an interesting book. Welcome to the podcast. I'm so happy you're here.
Thank you. Well, thank you for the opportunity. It's great to be here and to talk about my book.
Yeah, so let's start out telling the audience just a little bit about yourself and what led you to write your book, The Prophecy.
So it wasn't too long before I started writing my novel, The Prophecy, that I actually got really interested with writing. It was actually my cousin Ross, who lives in Australia, who got me into writing. He just wanted, because he does quite a bit of writing himself, and he just wanted to test my skills and see what I'd be like with being creative. Mm-hmm. So he would set me a few scenarios where he'd just say, pick a subject or an item and write about it in no more than 2 pages, and then send it back to me, and I'll review it. And that's so started doing that, writing a few short stories for him, and he would review it for me, and he started to notice straight away that I've got a talent, and he really loved my work I was doing. Mm-hmm. And then that just started to build on these stories, and then I suddenly was hit with an idea for The Prophecy. And what I wanted to do straight away was combine my love of J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit with my own experiences of hiking through Scotland, because I knew the landscape so well. Mm-hmm. So my perfect idea was to take the imagination and magic that sort of inspired by Tolkien and then bring it into the real Scotland that everyone knows today. So you marry the two together, and it just seemed the perfect idea. And then all the characters, all the locations, the story, all just fell into place, and I just knew exactly what I wanted to write.
Yeah, and that sounds like that. I always love hearing about the creative process that people go through, because it's such an interesting way, especially in your case, how it came about and how it was all able to come together for you. And I know you also, with your book, you actually earned an award. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So yeah, well, first of all, I am absolutely flattered with how well my book has done, especially since it's my first novel. I mean, when I first wrote it, it was just going to be something nice for myself, a really nice achievement. But then I just decided to publish it. And since its publication, it has met such success, which has blown my mind. And It's won several awards. Like, within months of it being published, I've won awards for the Book Festival Awards. And then recently, I had a really amazing first place award come through in the Outstanding Creator Awards. I won first place in the paranormal category, and I thought, wow, my first novel, and it's just won first place award. Absolutely amazing.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And congratulations on that. That is amazing.
Thank you.
So let's get into the book a little bit. Can you tell us about the characters and maybe the scene? You mentioned Scotland, but can you tell us a little bit more about that?
So yeah, I can do. So the characters I wanted to make as likable to the real world as possible. So you could really connect with them and follow them through their journey and really connect with all their thoughts and emotions. Mm-hmm. So they're really relatable people, because I find that a reader will relate better with someone that they can truly understand and feel. Mm-hmm. So my main character, Warwick, his name immediately came to me when I had the idea for the book. But his character, he's supposed to be, at the beginning, he's this character who's a bit lost in his way. but throughout the journey, he's not just journeying to find answers to this prophecy. He's journeying to find his inner self that's been lost and taken from him. So it's more of a journey of the inner self as well as the external self.
Uh-huh.
But then you get the second main character coming in, which is the mentor, his name's Rowan. But at the start, he's just this mysterious character, and he's almost a little bit fearful because of how dark and mysterious he seems.
Mm-hmm.
But then as you go more into the story, you start to see his character completely change. And he becomes like another main character in the story. And in some ways, they both Warwick and Rowan become mentor to each other as they bounce off each other and help them to complete their own individual journeys to get to that main goal at the end. And that's what I really love about the characters I created.
Yeah, that bringing together. And then like you were saying, almost like would you call it maybe a hero's journey, where we're, on that inner journey of finding, ourselves as we're, going through life?
But yes, yeah, it's definitely a hero's journey, because the challenges he has to face, and so many of them he has to face alone, it takes an immense amount of courage and strength to be able to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And as you mentioned about being, wanting it to be relatable, that or being able to read about others' journeys and what they have to go through. And like you mentioned, because a lot of our own, as a reader, our own journeys in life are, they're solo, right? They're things we can go through. So being able to, I love stories like this that weave that hero's journey in, that is so relatable, but then also like the magic and then the mystical side of things too. Because I think for me as a reader, when I read those kinds of stories, it opens up so much creativity to be able to read stories like that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more there. It's almost like the best of everything in the world, isn't it? All accumulated into one. So you just get a bit of everything.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that. And I love that fantasy element to be able to, I feel like I always walk away from books like that with like an expansion, like creativity is expanded, right? Because I was able to perceive something in a different way through the story.
Yeah. And then that affects your own stories that you go on to write and all that.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And so you mentioned the scene was in Scotland. So is it in modern day or a different time period?
So yes, you did mention that. So yeah, so it's set quite a while ago. You're talking quite a few hundred years ago, sort of around Dark Ages in that time, so it's quite primitive. Mm-hmm. So you've got knights and warriors, and you've got believing in the old gods. So it's very, very early on. But I deliberately wanted the setting to be quite old, again, because a lot of the inspiration came from Tolkien's work. So I wanted to create that same sort of feeling, but in Scotland.
Yeah, and you mentioned, and I know just when I was reading a little bit about your background, that you love the outdoors, you love hiking, and you love to be able to do those things. And so having that understanding of Scotland and understanding of maybe the terrain to be able to tell that story, how did that work for you to weave that all in?
So I have quite an imaginative mind. I'm very visionary mind. Mm-hmm. So the places I go and see, I can just play them back in my mind like a photograph whenever I need them. So my mind becomes almost like a mood board, just looking at these places I've been to. And I remember when I've been on my walks, climbing mountains, walking across waterfalls, and all the things I've done, when I think about them, it's as if I'm there right now, even if it was, say, 10 years ago. But it only feels right in the now that I'm still walking that journey. So as I'm writing, I just think about that place I went to that I want to put into my writing. Mm-hmm. And instantly I'm taken there. So I can just see all the landscape, all the different textures, all the colours. And I'm just thinking, I can just easily write that with my words, and I can just layer it in beautifully into what I'm writing. That's how I get all my really imaginative writing works.
That's an amazing quality to have. I wish I had that. I definitely do not. So that's amazing to be able to do that. And so maybe we mentioned the main character as Warwick, and him going on this hero's journey, right? And all these things that he faced. What was maybe one of your favorite parts to write in the book, or maybe one of the journeys that he went through that you specifically related to or really enjoyed writing about?
So I have a few moments that I loved writing and which was so fun to write. One of my favourites was about halfway through the book when they get to the Isle of Skye and they're inside the cave. Because when I was a child, I used to do lots of caving. Mm-hmm. So I knew what it was like to be squeezing through tight holes in caves and that, and all what it looks like being deep underground. Uh-huh. And I really captured that image brilliantly. So it's just like it's like watching a film reading that chapter, because you can just, as you read the words, you just see all the details of all the rocks, all the formations inside the cave, all the challenges he has to face as he squeezes through the cave. Mm-hmm. And I just love the detail and how tense that chapter feels. There's one chapter I love to read back on, and it does make me smile. And then I had another part in a small little section in the book, which I just loved. Because I was writing about dragons, mm-hmm. I had the perfect idea to give story to the legend of the Loch Ness Monster. It seemed perfect. So I wrote the Loch Ness Monster in as a dragon appearing out of water, and it just seemed perfect. And it was just so fun to write.
Yeah. In that, being able to have fun with what you're doing. You can hear that in your voice, and I can tell when you're talking about it, that having that fun element too, as a reader, you can pick up on that too, that the person, the writer, the author really enjoys what they're doing, right? And I love being able to read scenes like that you're talking about, that are very involved or very imaginative, or it's like it takes you, like you were saying, it takes you into the book. Like if you were watching a movie or something, how you sometimes get caught up in the movie and nothing else is around you, right? Like that's what it sounds like in your book, that you're able to create with these scenes.
Yeah, it's exactly that. It just completely, it takes your full focus, and in some ways, it almost flips reality. Mm-hmm. By that, I mean that the book is the reality, and then the rest of the world around you becomes the fantasy that temporarily becomes close to you. So your full focus is on what you now think is reality.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Uh-huh. So during the writing process, and maybe even, I know you mentioned the awards and how, that was surprising to you, but is there anything as you were writing the book that surprised you, or that you in being your first book, maybe you found more difficult than you thought that it might be, as you were envisioning what the book might look like when you finished it?
Well, yeah, there was quite a lot of changes. Even though I had right from the beginning the whole story as I planned it out, how I wanted it to be, mm-hmm. It took quite a while to get it to that stage. Finding for some parts, it was just getting the details and balance just right without being too much or just too little. The balance is always a tricky bit to get. Yeah. But after a few edits of the first draft I did, I started to find that balance, and then after that, it was just seamless all the way through. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there were challenging parts, but in the end, I just persisted, mm-hmm. and it relates quite a lot to one of my my important messages that I tried to capture in my main characters with the real world, mm-hmm. because the real world is quite a tough place to live in. There's so much hardships we all face in everyday life, and I like to try and capture the message that we all put on the planet for a purpose, and that no matter how long it takes, we're all going to get to our purpose place that we're supposed to get to in life.
Yeah. And what a great message, especially, in the past couple of years, right? It's everybody's been through a lot of struggle and a lot of, I think, like shocking struggle, I guess would be maybe how I would describe it. And I love that theme that you're talking about of purpose and getting to the place, because that also in that space of reading a book like this, that is that magical, mystical, that fantasy side of things. Again, I think having those stories and feeling how much they relate also helps open us up to the ideas or the concepts